blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is the solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Love Show. We have a really fantastic, fun guest today. And let's twinkle Dawn because she is moving. She's got lots of things going on.
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. What's going to happen with her?
Ooh, I don't know. We'll let her tell us.
Okay.
But today we have a really fun and exciting moment because we are streaming live to you from the Global Peace Tribe Retreat in LA. Here with Scott Catamas.
We should have made the bed.
Oh, Scott. Do you want to make the bed? All right, y'all. Today, just like every day, remember that you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, all of the podcast platforms everywhere. You can find us on Facebook, which is probably where you're watching right now. And, Scott and I, since we're sitting at the retreat, we're talking a lot about love, and we're talking about relationships, and we're talking about self-love. I mean, that's what I'm teaching today. It's profound self-acceptance. And, we get to, because we span such a sweet age group. Oh, Scott.
I'm right in the middle of the baby boom generation, literally in the exact middle. So yes, I'm a boomer, and you are a millennial.
Yes, I'm right smack in the middle.
And there's like a couple of generations in between there.
Gen Xers, which don't
Gen
give
Xers,
it at all.
Right. And we also have with us Jasmine Bear is right here.
Oh.
Okay, thank you, sweetheart.
So we were gonna talk a little bit about men, women, boomers, millennials, and honoring differences and what that looks like in a relationship and how to do that. Because I think that one of the things that happens in relationship is that this idea of, like, you want the idea of sameness, but you also want the identity or the understanding of individuality. And there's lots of places where it just clashes. You're like, oh, we're the same. And that's exciting. Like, we're totally the same. And then it's like, oh, we're too much the same, And I think that one of the places that people get really caught up is that I want you to be a certain way. Yeah. And I want you to be the same. And I want you to, like, the sameness, like the psychology of that sameness means that you're safer. Right. Like, we saw that during the pandemic and the masking and people like, oh, they're my friends, so they're safer than people out in the world. And I don't know about everybody else, but I knew a lot of people out in the world who were very, very specific.
I knew both. I knew people that thought if you didn't wear a mask or do social distancing, you were a pariah. And then there's my friends in Sedona who are all dancing and hugging and cuddling and thinking that people wearing masks were crazy. And I was really, honestly, right in the middle of that. It was like, wow, isn't it interesting how there could be such a diverse difference of opinion on this thing? Yes.
I mean, that's just one example of how this whole...
But let's stay with that example for a moment, because where it goes bad is when judgment comes in. We're going to have differences. We're going to have different ideas about religion, about sexuality, about politics, about whether or not we should make the bed and how important that is. We're going to have differences about all sorts of things. It's when we go into judgment of I'm right, you're wrong. Yeah. This is good, this is bad. That's the toxicity that ruins relationships. And, between the two of us, we've coached over 1,000 couples and families. I've coached 990. She's coached 10. But between the two of us, it's over 1,000. No, it's not.
I'm getting up there.
You are getting up there.
I'm like moving pretty quick. All right.
I'm her assistant now. I used to be her mentor. Now I'm her assistant. So she's moving up quickly. But back to it. It's when we go into judgment. Yes. Right. And just, God, if you really want to create peace in the world, Notice when you're judging.
Yeah.
When are you falling into judgment? When are you making that other person bad, stupid, or wrong? Thank you, Paul Sterling. That's a Paul Sterlingism. He's here with us. Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought up judgment, because I think that this is one of the most crucial pieces of self-love. This is the most crucial piece of love, is that when we start looking at our judgments. So judgment on the outside is like, oh, that person. I'm going to give a real life example. So I was out dancing the other night to this 90s Chicago house DJ, and I was wearing like something I would probably wear in the 90s. Just like, I had like my midriff showing. It was, and I just don't care anymore. I don't care. And I saw these people snickering, because I have this like dance move where I put my hand up and then I like bring it down. And they would, every time I would do that, they would snicker and giggle. And at some point I was like, y'all. And it occurred to me as I'm sitting here dancing, thinking about my just delight and enjoyment in the moment, in my body, in the music, and to have someone who is judging me, right? And so I'm thinking about this judgment piece, right? So when we're judging another person, it's a direct understanding of who we are on the inside, right? Who we are, what are my values, what are my wants and needs, what are the things that are being stimulated here. So as I'm thinking about them, and I'm kind of getting like, I feel myself getting like annoyed about it, and I'm like, I bet it's really hard sometimes for people who don't have the freedom. Like I have a lot of freedom to be, I give myself a lot of freedom to be myself, to be in my body, to push the edge of what feels comfortable for me. So like wearing what I wore, I was like, whoa, this is edgy, like let's just do that. Let's push it out there. Did I make friends? Because I wore a pair of pants that my friend makes, and I would never wear these pants out in the real world, but I was like, this is like where you'd wear them.
Yeah.
And I felt bad. I'm not bad, but I was like, oh, these people were very closed off, very like wearing very, like when people are conforming to the norm so that they can find safety in that. It was that. And I was like, to see someone's pleasure or enjoyment or their whatever makes them happy and in their life, and to judge them for that. That's got to be a really hard life.
Yeah.
It's got to be a really hard life to be there, because I'm just living my life. And so when you're thinking about the judgments on the outside, think about what your values are, because it's stimulating something for you. A want, need, or value. It's stimulating your belief system, and really take a look at whether that belief system is serving you or serving your relationship or your community. Because if you're like talking all the time about others, like, what is that about you? Like, bring it back in, like circle it back around. Is like bringing it back to the self. Is like, oh, why am I judging this person for when their hand goes up and comes down? Like, what is it? Is it that I don't give myself permission to do that myself? Or maybe it's that it's a silly move or a funny move, or is there, what's there?
I'm just really feeling the sadness that you brought up when I think of people I know that are very highly judgmental. It is sad. It's a sad place to be living, to be living in that judgment. And it is what creates violence in the world. One of my big turning points was traveling with Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Compassionate Communication. And at the time I was working as a producer, and I'd been hired by his company to do a series of videos with him. So we arranged for me to travel with him for 3 weeks. So I met him down in Corona Del Mar, and we spent 3 weeks traveling all the way up the West Coast, finishing in Seattle. We were staying in hotel rooms together, eating meals together. And probably 5 or 6 days in, we were having breakfast. And I don't even remember what it was that I said. He goes, "You know what you are, Scott? You're a fix-it jackal. You think that you need to fix everybody and make everything better. And that's a form of judgment." And here's the master calling me out, right? And so he challenged me. He said, "I just want you to make a commitment for while we're together, notice how many judgmental thoughts you have. And those judgments might be trying to fix things to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Judgment might even be, wow, she's beautiful. That's a judgment.
Yeah.
Wow, she's hot. That's a judgment. Notice how many judgmental thoughts you have every day. So I committed to it. I thought I was spiritual. I did. I thought I was a good guy. I thought I was a spiritual human being. Well over 100 judgmental thoughts every day. Well over 100.
Scott, just because you have judgments doesn't necessarily mean that you're not spiritual.
I've kind of sorted that out. But the point is, it was shocking.
Yeah.
It was shocking. And I probably still have close to that many judgmental thoughts, but I notice it now. Oh, there I go. Oh, there I go. And I don't say what I used to say as often. I have more discernment, right? And you've helped me with that. Trish has definitely helped me with that, pointing out things that were kind of more baby boomer way of thinking. That's not millennial way of thinking.
Wait, is that a judgment?
Yeah, possibly. So I guess here's the thing. Underneath our judgments, you can find discernment, and discernment's wonderful. So what's the difference? Discernment is, Scott, thank you for inviting me to your class, but I've got other plans. Judgment is, oh, that shit doesn't work. Right? And so how can we set boundaries? How can we be discerning of what we choose to do or to think without making anybody else bad or stupid or wrong? BSW, no BSW.
I love that you brought up discernment. As you know, that last year, the word that I picked for my birthday, I picked my New Year's word, was discernment. And what I got was a lot of grief. That was a lot. And what I understood about, and now what I understand about discernment is really based on your own integrity. It's based on your own inner alignment. So my discernment and your discernment will be very different. And that's the thing, is like, when you want to really stop judging, is respecting a person's life for what they choose to live. My sister lives a very different life than I do. And she makes her own decisions, and I'll speak my mind about whatever it is. And I'll also say, hey, regardless of whatever you choose, I still love you and I'm here for you. These are my opinions about the situation, and this is how it is for me. Which is not a judgment. It's I'm protective. I'm careful for you. I want to keep you safe and I'm going to be honest and not create some weird back end talk shit about her. I'm just going to be direct, and I'm not going to be like, hey, I love you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to walk with you here. So the realm of discernment is finding that place in you that protects you, that protects your wants, needs, and helps you move forward in your integrity. And I know that these are practices that we've been practicing for a long time, and it's way up here in the ethers, and that bringing them down into the practices is actually the daily practices. The moment to moment practices is actually where it's at. And they're subtle practices. Yeah. Some of them are just in the moment. Some of them are oh, I screwed that up again. Can we try that different? Or, hey, Scott, I do this thing when I get upset, and I say, hey, I'd really like to stop the conversation. And then you'll be like, okay. And they'll be like, okay, so then you're like, wait. I thought you said you would stop the conversation. So I can rope someone in to helping me work on my stuff if they're willing. Scott is always willing.
Well, we call it yellow light.
Yeah.
Hey, yellow light, let's slow down. Yellow light, let's connect.
Yeah. And so if I have someone in relationship, if I have a friend or a partner that's hey, Scott, I have this tendency to overbook, or I have this tendency to, which is really true, I have this tendency to do all these things, and I just might need, not that it's going to stop me from doing anything, but to discern how I spend my time. If you see me doing that thing and getting all ramped up, can you whisper something in my ear? Can you be like, hey, do you have capacity to do these things that you're signing up for? You'd be like, oh, thank you. And the best thing here is to not get upset about what you asked them to ask you about. Anybody else have this experience where you're like, can you help me with this? And then you're like, stop nagging.
Here's a real life example with you and me on that. Frequently, I get, when I ask, hey, Trish, how are you doing? Because it's rare that we're together in person. Usually it's by text, right? So this is really, I love being with you in person, by the way. It's just, whenever I'm with you, it's like, oh my God, I love her. But it's usually texting, hi, Trish, how are you? And usually half of her text is how frazzled she is because of all of her homework.
It's so
And she lists all the things, all the papers that are due, within 5 minutes. And then it's like, okay. And I'm like wanting her to do more, coaching, teaching, the things that I like, right? But no, and then I just signed up for 17 more classes. I just signed up for a new university. And it's like, breathe, Scott, breathe, don't judge. This is, But here's the key, because there is the part of me that all that annoys me.
Totally.
It really
annoys me too, if you want to know.
But somewhere in my brain, I remember Trish saying, I want to be the first member of my family that graduates from college.
Yeah.
And that's a really beautiful value.
It's a big deal.
And so when I'm getting annoyed, I'm thinking, she's made a commitment to something really precious, to be the first person in her family who graduates from college.
Yeah.
And so that's how I can go from being judgmental. And the lesson here is everything people do, as crazy as it may seem, they're trying to meet some precious value or need.
Yeah.
And notice the difference when I'm kind of talking about all these classes and how frazzled she is, like that's all judgmental, versus the beauty of her value to graduate from college and to be the first member of her family to do that. You see the difference? And so when I fall into my judgment about it, and I remember the value driving her, that's why she's doing that. That's a beautiful thing.
One's about you and one's about me.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So your judgment about my frazzledness, which don't get me wrong, I'm like 6 papers in a week is something else. And I'm like, if you haven't seen me around, it's because of that. Yeah. And your frustration is about you.
Yeah.
It's about
totally.
the things that you would like to work with me. I would love to work more with you.
Right.
I just don't have that capacity right now.
Of course.
But then when you drop back into like my goals or my desires, and you're like, oh, okay, I see you're crazy and I love you. Keep doing what you're doing. But it's really taking a step back. So if this person, and here's another, like just a plug for gratitude here. It's like if this person, when I was dancing, instead of judging me for just doing whatever my natural Trish thing is, that if they had the look of like, oh my God, this woman is so in her thing. She's doing her thing. Like, get it, girl. That it would have shifted the dynamic. I mean, maybe we wouldn't have been friends. Maybe like the people that I was out with would have like made friends with this couple instead of them snickering back and forth, right? And like pointing, and then that they're just like, oh, enjoying the being in the essence of my desire, my goal, my embodiment. Like even in your example, right? It's like, oh, that's Trish working towards her goal, and you're now in it with me,
right?
Instead of on the outside looking in as I'm a separate being. Like now it's our goal together, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, okay. Well, let me see if I can support her in doing these crazy school things.
Yeah. Everything, again, I want to keep bringing back to everything we do is to meet some needs, to meet some values. And so that's the way out of judging people. Like the woman who was Snickers, the Snicker people, if they could have said, wow, look at how free she is.
Yes.
Look at how comfortable she is in her body and how free she is to express herself.
Yeah.
And to see the beauty of that freedom. And then imagine if they'd come up and said, we really were enjoying watching how free you are and you're dancing. That's how the connection takes place. That's where the friendship begins.
Or even like, I wish I could be that free. Because that might even have been real.
That would have been really cool.
Then I'd be like, oh my God, let me tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
You just kind of like slip it here and like a little over here and a little over here.
Because usually we judge people either because they're so different.
Yeah.
And we think that's bad. Mm-hmm. But underneath it, oftentimes it's something that we envy. Omashar was telling a beautiful story yesterday about how, he's a Brit raised very, in a very snooty, stiff upper lip. And here he is in Los Angeles. He just flew in from Colorado, Los Angeles, where there's like all these beautiful people.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And they're free.
And the moment you're in Hollywood or you're even at the airport, like all these gorgeous women and gorgeous men, and they're all buff and fixed and, it's LA, right? And he saw a black man who was just chiseled and gorgeous. And it was Paul Sterling who did this. It was Paul who was, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Paul.
we were talking about this.
It was Paul. And Paul went up to this guy and goes, wow, I just want to acknowledge how chiseled you are, man. You look really beautiful. And this dude was like, whoa, thanks. Now, what a beautiful thing Paul did. Wow, beautiful. Because it's like, we can be prejudiced just like, well, black man trying to whatever, because there's white, black, there's that thing. And then, Paul's older and he could be judgmental because he's not chiseled like, this guy was. But to see the beauty and then to have the courage to acknowledge it, that's creating peace in our world.
And it's also, like this person, if you're chiseled, you're doing the work. And there's something that you want out of it.
Right up there with almost as hard as she works on those damn 6 papers a week.
Oh, the rhetorical analysis essay was the worst. Anyway, whatever. Whoa. And I still got an 89% on it. I was like, what? Anyway,
right. 89%.
No, I could have done better. I don't know how to win this class. I'm figuring it out. But even just to acknowledge, so acknowledging the hard work, because it's not that Paul acknowledged the guy's body. I mean, yes, he did, but it was beyond that. Right. It was like, man, you are chiseled. Like, Paul works out and Paul is very active. So he knows the value of what it takes to get the discipline and the actual chiseledness, like to focus on those muscles. Like that is an incredibly hard work. It's a science. And so to go and be like, hey, I like this thing that you're doing. Like, good job, you, without being a creep.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good job, Paul. You're good at this.
Well, and that also takes courage because I when Paul was telling the story, I noticed as I was imagining, could I do that? My fear would be that he would think I'm hitting on him.
What's wrong with that?
Ooh.
Oh. See, I just don't. I just flirt with everyone. Yeah. That's just my.
But see, you also but now here's a difference. You can get away with flirting with everybody. We have this thing called a Me Too movement.
Oh yeah.
When you flirt, it's like, oh, isn't that wonderful? The pretty girl is flirting. But as an older, now this is part of our reality.
Weird. I'm not being weird about it.
But you can get away with it, my dear. You can get away with it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, flirting for me is a way of appreciating another person's personness.
You're clean. There's no question that you're clean, and you happen to be an attractive 35-year-old woman. 6. She had a birthday.
Oh, see, okay. Here are the differences, right? Mm-hmm. And we're acknowledging differences in generation, differences in communication styles,
differences in perception.
Yes.
Right? Literally, just think about this for a moment. If we both went up to any person and say, wow, you're really beautiful, there is the possibility that it would be taken by either of us in a really beautiful way. And there's also the possibility that for me, it would be seen as an old guy coming on to somebody. Right? That's a judgment that's out there.
I would actually never say, like, hey, you're really beautiful. I would never say that. I would say, ooh, I really like your style. Ooh, you make those shoes look good.
Yeah, very specific.
Because I'm the millennial in me, and the person who's looked at like social conformity and those types of things, like to acknowledge someone's body is actually not really, like, I don't get a choice here in some matters, unless I'm like the guy who's like super ripped and choosing that. There's a lot of places where I don't get to choose the body. You don't get to choose your body, or how our collagen is leaving, or how, you know, like, I mean, it's just natural life. It's okay. So I try specifically not to mention someone's body, but I try to think about things that they are actively putting effort into. So style, education, things.
Choice of clothes.
Yeah. So those types of things. It's like, ooh, I really like your style. That coat, woo! You would make that coat look great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good tip.
So if you're hearing the flute, it's because we're at the retreat right now.
And it's starting. And we're up here with you. But the Global Peace Drive Retreat is the launch of the retreat taking place down.
Let's play a little dynamic around long-term relationships. Here. I'm gonna actually use the one that I'm gonna use one with us. Scott is a lot more free floating than I am. Like, you have capacity for change and like last minute things, and like my nervous system does not. And that's a place where we've gotten into a lot of friction. Well, let me actually, that's where I've gotten into a little friction, where I've gotten into a little judgment of Scott. And that's the one place that we've had the most challenge. My most challenge is those places. And at some point, I'm just like, this is Scott. Like, this is who Scott is. I'm just a ball of overcommitting and stress, and he's a little different. He's like, it'll work itself out. But to actually just sit with and accept Scott, or accept myself for who I am. Again, it takes a level of me knowing who I am and managing how I move with that energy. Like, am I going to force him into the box of my life? I don't think that's fair for him. I don't think it's fair for you. And you too.
But I also need to be sensitive. Because my lesson here is she has a strong value for consistency, stability, and knowing what's happening.
Yeah.
And underneath that, as I got to know her,
It's safety.
It's safety. And a lot of people who especially grew up in unstable homes had to create, and this is an important thing to recognize, people that you might judge, and I'm not talking about Trish now, I'm going beyond it, but people you might judge as being neurotic or control freaks probably grew up in a home where there wasn't safety or stability, and they had to develop a hypervigilance to constantly, am I safe? Am I safe? What's gonna happen next? And a lot of, and Emily talks a lot about this. And of course, Emily's one of our dear friends who I lived with for 5 years. She had an incredibly unsafe home growing up. Her mother was a meth addict. And so she, grew up hypervigilant. So it's been part of my sensitivity training. I had a mother who loved me and a father who loved me. And we got divorced and there's that drama, but I was always safe. And I'm a tall white man. So I've always felt safe in this world. But I'm learning how for my friends who don't always feel safe. And one other last little piece about safety, there's the childhood safety part. But Jonathan Robinson was on our show and sharing the study that was done that's shocking. They asked 1,000 men and 1,000 women, when was the last time you didn't feel physically safe? The aggregate answer for men was 3 years ago. The aggregate answer for women was in the last 3 days. Meaning that women constantly, I mean, you just had somebody following you at the beach 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have anybody. I mean, I
He
can't remember.
touched my hand.
A stranger, right?
Asked me to kiss him in 30 seconds of us meeting.
Right.
And then followed me.
Right.
Like, right here.
I can't remember the last time I was afraid like that or having to protect myself like that. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, 2 days ago.
Thank you, Scott, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Again, it's really looking. I think one of the actions of love. So my concept of love is the radical acceptance of what is, and then there's a bunch of actions that follow that. Is like, who are the people that relax your nervous system? So if we're at a coffee shop, like just this morning, I was with a friend, and I was like, oh, I just kind of want to relax, and I felt myself literally close my eyes at a public fast coffee shop, and I was like, I laid back, and I was like, oh. And I could sense my body, like I had to think about it, and it was like, so I know Scott is here. I know he's not going to let anyone touch me, and I can just close my eyes in a public space and drop my emotional, physical, spiritual guard and just be with you. And it really is a pretty profound place to do that. And some of us never get that opportunity to have a safe person. And again, what we teach is that place of consideration, being considerate of another person's stuff. Like that there's a layer of being a woman that is dangerous. It's dangerous for me just because I look the way that I look, and people think that they can get up on that. And then there's places where you are unsafe, and I get to manage and kind of work with your things without judging you. It's like, maybe I should pick ways that I can engage with Scott that really feels good for us both. Like thinking about that. Remember I don't know if I'm sure you've all heard about it. My triple win is like, is it good for me? Yeah. Is it good for Scott? Yeah. Is it good for all of us? And I like to play that game and that dance with you.
Speaking of safety.
I know, she's like sleeping right between us.
Really, I mean, my dog, and her head is like in this really it's nudged between her butt and my butt, right? Her head is like nudged right in this, so we just can't fart. But,
I don't need to. I got them all out.
Yeah, me too. But talk about safety. I mean, look at how relaxed she is. We're talking about my puppy.
Well, again, nervous systems.
Right.
If you don't know anything about the nervous system, go check out Ali Bravo on Instagram or Facebook. We also did a nervous system regulation class in my self-secure class. I wanted to come back to a conversation that I'm just a little bit about how unsafety shows up. So I'm working with a client right now whose parents were incredibly wealthy and very clinical with this person, like emotionally distant, and I'm going to call it like emotional neglect to that point, because they were very intellectual, very much like in this very specific way. And this person is so shocked. The amount of because I touch my clients, I'm like, hey, how you doing? And this person literally will get overwhelmed in their nervous system just by the level of me asking a question of like, how are you? Do you feel safe right now? And them going, I don't even know what that is. So one of the sessions, this is not my normal session, like this is an in-person session. I was like, I had all this stuff planned, and it occurred to me, I think this person just needs to be held. And we went to a park, and I let him lay on my chest, and I held him, and he wept for 25 minutes.
Beautiful.
And I was like, this is the work. And he just was like, thank you. No one's ever given that to me before. And like, I'm all teary about it. Because it's like not judging what he needs, but just being really compassionate. Like, what does he need? Like in my boundaries, of course, like what does he need? How can I best support this person's nervous system? How do I best negotiate reality together here so that we can honor our differences and honor our similarities to really create relationship? Again, we started here with judgments, right? Now we can judge people and create more divide for whatever, judge their choices or judging their belief systems or their clothes or their movements or whatever. But we're also just creating more separation and more isolation and more harm. That actually compassion, forgiveness, understanding, and acceptance is actually the way of internal self-love and external love.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's beautiful. Thank you for doing that for him.
Oh, I cried. I cried about it for like an hour afterward. I was like, the things we do to people. My friend was like, you don't need to take that on. And I was like, I'm grieving for humanity right now. Just leave me alone. I gotta do this. Because I think it's important, you know, like not shaming, accepting your feelings. Let's talk about that for a second. Accepting your feelings is one of the most amazing bits of self-love. If you can truly accept what is happening inside of you, to not shame it or judge it, but to create a safe container. It doesn't have to be with anybody else. And in fact, I advise you not to do big, like angry emotions, those ways of like, to drop into your body and be like, oh, I'm feeling angry right now. Or I'm feeling frustrated. Or man, I feel deep grief about how this person's parents treated them and how many other children in the world have this experience and similar responses to it. Like, I gotta get that out. Can't keep that in. It's gonna poison my whole system.
So notice, what are some of your feelings that aren't safe for you to have, that you have judgment around? Because all of us have grown up being taught that certain feelings are not okay to have. Now, this is especially more true for men than women.
All feelings.
Right.
Other than happy.
No, angry. We're allowed to be angry, or we're allowed to be happy. Yeah. Women are not allowed to be angry. Men are allowed to be angry. Really. I mean, look at the cultural programming. And I talk about this a lot. Almost every little boy on the playground learned, you don't cry. Because if the ball hits you and it freaking hurts and you cry, sissy, faggot, pussy.
Yep.
And notice those words, horrible, ugly words, are very derogatory about the feminine.
Yes.
They're derogatory words that imply that that's what girls do, and girls are
bad, stupid, and wrong.
Exactly. We're taught on the playground, BSW, right? And so we then decide, okay, cannot cry, cannot be sad, cannot be confused, cannot be overwhelmed. Those are all things that are not manly. Yeah. Being stoic and, stuffing our feelings. So comments are coming in.
Yeah. I think stoicism is there's benefits in certain qualities of stoicism, but I think that it's one of the most particularly harmful bits of philosophy around the suffocation of the embodiment of one's feelings and an actual human experience. So I want to read. Hi, David. Thanks for being here. David says, being a man, showing all ways a man is just as he is, as love knows him. He stands here, focused, balanced, life in itself, in a moment, one way as one moment. We change into another. Man is just woman. Yes.
Beautiful, David. Thank you. I love that.
It's, again, the way that we're taught in our society, but in our culture, in our family, that we're separate. To judge, we talked about it as like judging the feminine. Like men are not to be feminine, women are not to be masculine. And even now, like the whole spiritual community is going off about like feminine, masculine traits. And there's a whole thing happening. And I'm always like, oh, but there's so many beautiful qualities that we each can like weave in and move in and out of, that it doesn't have to look a certain way, but to have deep respect for the person that is right in front of you, to honor and respect the vulnerability that Scott or any man in your life shows when he has feelings, to invite that, to allow yourself to be safe enough for that person to express their feelings and not to use them against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a percentage, theoretical percentage, how many of your clients, your couple clients, do people just shame each other for their feelings?
Oh,
I mean,
don't cry. It's not that bad. Don't cry. I mean,
I know you hear that all the time. That sounded very masculine.
and I'm the exact opposite. I'll see somebody, and I've done this hundreds of times in my sessions. I'll see somebody start to choke up and stuff it, and I'll stop the conversation. I'll say, let's go back. I want those tears. What do those tears have to say? And I'll support, because it's those tears is when someone chokes up and have tears, whatever that thought was, whatever stimulated that experience, I want to know that. That's where I want to go. That's where I want to go as a friend when I'm with somebody, and it's where I want to go as a coach, because that's the treasure. And how often do we choke it back? We go stoic, right?
How fast sometimes we move through our feelings. How fast we bypass someone else's feelings because of our own discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
So as a person who dates, sometimes I'm sitting there and I'll just be being real, doing my thing. And someone will be like, don't take that on. Or, it'll be okay. Oh my God, I hate this one. It'll be okay. Oh, this is like a slight pet peeve. It's not a big one. But that it'll be okay is such a brush off of my feelings. Or it tells me that they're literally uncomfortable with this feeling, not only in me, but in them, right? Because I'm good with it. I'm just going to express it out so that it just moves forward. The way that we can process our emotions, if we can do it in the moment instead of holding on to them, it doesn't, if you can process them now, it doesn't store. And if it does store, then it's something pretty big and you might want to talk about it. But again, if you can process them in the moment, then they just move forward, because, 10 to 30 seconds of emotion, it just like flies through and you move through it. But that's the place, is like when someone is uncomfortable with the feeling, I always stop there even. It's like, oh, where are you at right now with my expression or with your expression? Are you okay with this, whatever it is, like the big sadness or the big grief or the big anger or the big? Are you okay with the big? And let's talk about what's uncomfortable there. Let's sit with that. And maybe it's just sitting with it is like, let's pause for a second. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, taking the breath in. Because I don't want to judge them for not having capacity, but let's get real, Scott, is like a part of love and a part of self-love is actually expanding the capacity to be with discomfort.
Totally. Say that again. That's really huge.
Part of love is expanding the capacity to be with discomfort. Because I think that I know that we're all taught that life is supposed to be riding off into the sunset. It's supposed to be good. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to do all these things, white picket fence, all of the blah, 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 But how many of you have actually really experienced that? I've worked with so many clients who've literally had it all. They got the great education, they got the great job, they got the great wife and the kids and the picket fence and the 2.5 dogs or whatever it was, they got all the things that they were supposed to get, and they were still deeply unsatisfied. Still deeply saddened, still deeply frustrated, because they weren't allowed to be embodied in their true full expression of self, and nor did they know, because they had suffocated those sections of their life. But also in the sense of they didn't have the capacity, the emotional awareness capacity, under intelligence to be like, be with someone to ride the waves of life. Right? Like, life is difficult. People, there's traumas and there's triggers and there's griefs and there's big mads, big frustrations that if we can hold someone in those places, that just creates a depth. That vulnerability creates the depth of intimacy that I think that we're all seeking.
Yeah.
I think we're really seeking intimacy in this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Aww. I love that look on your face.
You know, a while back you said, let's talk about long-term relationships.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to weave a story, kind of what we've been talking about understanding and how people cannot understand each other even after being married for a long time. This story happened pretty early in my career. It happened many, many years ago. I was hired by a woman. She came to one of my workshops. And she said, "Oh, compassionate communication. I need you. You need to. I need to bring you in and work with my family." This is before Zoom, when I would meet with people in person. And she was Italian, and she'd been married for 18 years to Jake the plumber. And she hired me because she was Italian and she loved to talk and communicate. And at the dinner table, her husband, she called him Stoneface. And she would call him that in front of him. "Oh, old Stoneface, he never says anything. He just sits there and, lets me and everybody else do all the talking."
Ouch.
Right?
Actually, I'm just like, damn.
Right? So I am brought in to help Stoneface learn how to talk. And of course, do you think Jake, and of course, this beautiful man, Jake the plumber, do you think he really wants to have a love coach there, teaching him how he should be different?
Well,
right?
do you think that he really wants a woman who's like judging him for feeling? Like, why would you want to say anything to someone who's judging you, calling you Stoneface?
Exactly. That's
No.
exactly right. Now, luckily, Jake, I'm a big sports fan, and so is Jake. So we were actually able to bond over sports and develop communication and connection that way. And I said, well, I want to have some alone sessions. And I listened to him and, of course, gave him a lot of empathy for how judged he was by his own wife. And he was a good man, very dedicated to family, very dedicated to his wife and children. They had 3 children. And as we got talking, I asked him a little bit about his early childhood. And he revealed that his father was a drunk, and he was a violent drunk. And when his father would come home and was drunk, Jake and his sister would hide in the closet, holding each other's hands, listening to him screaming at their mother, and they would stay in the closet until they could hear their father snoring. Knew that he'd fallen asleep, and then it was safe to come out of the closet.
Oh.
So for him, loud is not safe. And he married a woman who was loud. And so Stoneface is just a little boy who isn't comfortable with all that loud. They've been married 18 years. She didn't have a clue about any of this. I figured it out after, I think, my second session with him. Right? Now, that's not about how great Scott is. That's about how disconnected people can be in a marriage by falling into judgment and bad, stupid, wrong instead of understanding our spouse.
He's scared.
He was scared. And loud wasn't fun. To Trish's credit, very early on in our relationship, she said, "Scott, I can't handle people yelling at me. If and when you get mad at me, please don't raise your voice."
Yep.
She made that very clear. Have I ever raised my voice with you?
No.
Because she made that very clear. And the beautiful part, there's 2 parts of that story that's beautiful. The first part is her courage and wisdom to inform me. I don't do well with loud voice. And then I get kudos for remembering that and honoring it.
One of the thing about self-love, right? So I know many of you have
This
heard
is
my
a self-love
story.
show.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thanks for reminding me. What show is this?
One of the things about self-love is to know oneself, right? Is to address this certain aspects of self. And if I know things, like I'm a really big fan of setting people up for success. And that's a big fan of like setting people up for success in loving me or me loving them. It's like if I know the tools, like I can just be like, here, have this tools.
Mm-hmm.
Don't yell at me. Or I get resentful and like, and I move away.
Yeah.
And it's one of the key pieces there. Like I can literally just hand this gift to you to make it easier for you. But that takes me looking at things and me accepting that this is a piece of me and maybe trying to change it if I feel like that's something that can be. But again, nervous system interaction here. And I know that one, like, I'm going to tell you how it got here in just a brief moment, is that after really stepping out of a couple of pretty abusive relationships, both emotionally and physically, that to step back and to address how I participated, how I either didn't protect myself, how I wasn't discerning or didn't create boundaries, created these situations, whether I was perpetuating early childhood stuff or if I wasn't just standing up for myself, for my values. And to really sit back and think about, like, what does work for me? What is moving? What does moving at a regulated nervous system look like? Hey, don't yell at me.
Yeah.
I can be yelly. But again, we don't get there.
Yeah, I can't even remember you ever yelling.
I don't yell at you.
Yeah.
And I rarely get there. It's like when I'm heated and passionate. And honestly, I'm aware of self enough with these practices to be like, I'm getting upset. I think we should take a break.
Yeah.
Like I can feel like the...
That's very wise. Very wise. And when she asks for a break, there's two types of people. There's the person that goes, yeah, it's a good idea. But more often there's the person, no, we got to work this out right now. No. And here's the thing.
I'm going to fight my way out of that box.
The person who needs a break is seeking safety and clarity. I need to get clear on what's really going on here. I need to calm down. I need to calm my center, my nervous system. The person's like, no, we need to fix this right now. Ironically, they want the same thing.
Yes.
They want safety and they want to feel connected, right? But we can't do that when we're triggered. You know, I mean, one of the greatest things that we teach is don't ever talk about a difficult subject until both of you are centered.
Yeah.
Because if you're not centered, you're going to fight. You're going to go into polarization. You're going to go into bad, stupid, wrong. You're going to go into those places. You have to be centered. Okay, what's really going on with me? Why is this important to me? And equally, what's going on with this other person and what's important to them.
There's a line that you use that I don't have verbatim, but I'm going to say it and you can correct me. Something about one of the things that Scott teaches and the thing that I really love to give my clients is the connected timeout. So one of the things about centered, like what does that even mean? What does centered even mean? And when I think about being centered in this context, it looks like, do I feel safe and connected to myself?
Good.
If I'm still judging you or thinking you're an asshole, sorry, Roy. If I'm still judging you or thinking that you're bad or awful or like
Wrong.
Making you the enemy image, that is not centered. We are not there. I'm not going to be able to hear you. I'm not going to be able to love you. Now, one of the places that do I feel safe in my body? Do I feel calm? I can still feel nervous, and being honest. Can I be honest about my feelings? Do I feel safe in my body? And do I care about the other person's experience?
Thank you. I was hoping that's where you were going to go.
I was going there, but you have this exact line about it that I can never remember. It's okay. It'll come to you.
Okay. I mean, Yeah, I mean, she pretty much said it. The litmus test for being centered is caring equally about what I'm needing and feeling and what the other person is needing and feeling.
Yes.
That's the litmus test for it.
And until then, take some space.
Absolutely.
And I know that the person who's like, I really need this worked out right now is probably feeling pretty shook.
I can't be happy until we work this out.
I can't either.
Yeah, and that's where that person's coming from. Just remember, if you're dealing with someone who's grasping for, we got to fix this now, their nervous system is so, they care so much about you and so much about the relationship with you that they can't relax and be okay until they feel trusting that the relationship is okay. Now, there's a certain enmeshed codependency in there that we can work on, but that's not something that's going to get solved in a day. That's a bigger term thing to work on.
There's also reassurance. Let's talk about reassurance.
I love reassurance.
I know you do.
You guys, I'm 67. And up to age 45, I had probably never even used the word reassurance. What's reassurance? But that was after I worked with hundreds of couples, I came to realize that we all need reassurance. We all are insecure. We all are vulnerable. The closer we go into relationship, the more intimate we become, the more we need reassurance. You still find me sexy? You still find me smart? You still enjoy being with me? You still like me? Those are really what's truly going on, even if it's in the form of, little boy just wants to know mommy still loves him, right? Or vice versa. Little girl just wants to know that daddy loves her. That daddy's going to create safety. We all have that.
That's the reason why I cry so often. I just like more humanity a lot.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, it's I just want to talk about how to do reassurance, right? So let's say you're in conflict or things are you can feel adrenaline pumping through your bloodstream or something's there. And let's talk. Okay, before we go there, let's talk a little bit about how insecurities are created, right? So insecurities are created through social norm behavior, like conformity to social norm. A lot of us, I don't know about you, Scott, but I'm not very good at conforming to the social norm, which means that outside of that, social norms, beauty, education, ways of being, clothing, money. I mean, you name all of the intersections of that. Now, if I can't fit in to what society tells me I'm supposed to fit into, then I'm being judged or I'm judging self around those things. And then my partner, who's also steeping in the same fishbowl of all of this as well, is probably judging self and judging other people around those social norms, right? So let's say my insecurity. And then, that's just on a more global scale. And then we're looking at individual things, like where we didn't get our needs met as children. And that's a whole other foundational level of insecurities. Like, oh my God, am I going to be fed? Am I going to be loved? Is love going to hurt? And then we were looking at those types of places there. So when you're looking at reassuring your partner, let's use an anxious and avoidant attachment thing because it's particularly easy and also very common, that the avoidant gets overwhelmed with the amount of love or connection.
I love you so much. Oh my God, this is what I've always wanted. I've always wanted this relationship. She doesn't love me.
No, I could say, Scott,
she doesn't really love me.
I love you. Mm-hmm. I do love you, and I love the way you love me. And I'm feeling also a little overwhelmed. And I want to know that I'm invested in this relationship. I'm invested in you. I think you're fucking amazing. I know you're amazing. I trust you, and I'm overwhelmed in my nervous system, and I want to come back after I've calmed down and gotten centered so that I can love you and me together and this little one in a way that's that's really nourishing for both of us. Do you want me to text you in about a few hours or maybe a day?
That'd be great. A few hours is better.
Okay, I'll text you in a few hours. I might need some more time,
Okay.
but I'll text you then.
Okay.
Would an emoji be okay as well?
I would love that.
Okay, great. So again, it's like
Beautiful reassurance.
Right.
Beautiful. I noticed that she went back and forth between her needs and my needs, or her imagining or care for my needs.
right, and that's the key point, is that we all want to know that we're cared for.
Mhm.
We want to know that we're safe, connected, that we are loved, that we're here together. And if you can think about us being here together, right? I love you. I'm going to give you just the key points of reassurance, right? Reassurance about the relationship and investment, and that you love them and that they're worthy and that you're worthy. That what you really need, and try to be as politely direct as possible. I told Scott that I needed space
Mhm.
for my nervous system. Don't let their brain do the work. Like your brains will do crazy things. Don't let the brain do the thing.
Yeah, the imagination is wonderful in some ways, but not in figuring out another person.
Yeah. Because the brain will automatically like, oh, they need space because they don't love me anymore, even regardless of how much reassurance you give them.
That's right.
So, hey, reassurance. I love you. You're worthy. I'm invested in this relationship. I need space because my nervous system is shutting down. Because maybe I had helicopter parents, or who knows what it could be. And then, guess what I did? I came back to reassurance. But I also acknowledged that there was stuff here like, oh, hey. And I came back to renegotiate what would work. And you were like, no, not 3 days. I was like, oh, okay.
No, one day.
No, not one day.
Yeah, you asked me. You said in a few hours or one day, and I very responded like a few hours.
Okay.
So that, because that was my insecurity, I want a few hours instead of having to wait a whole day.
Yeah. Right. And so you get to negotiate reality there.
And did you see? She said yes, and then she explained why she might need more time.
Yeah.
Right.
To take care of my body, because I want to come back to, again, going back to reassurance, I want to love us and you in a way that's safe for both of us. It's very key right here. Very key. Scott, I love teaching with you. And
we're going to be teaching all day today, tomorrow, the next few days. So who do you know in Los Angeles? There's still tickets available.
day tickets.
If you know anybody in LA, or you are in LA or near LA, best way to reach us, if you go to, I guess, your Facebook page or my Facebook page, we'll have the information there. Come get live teaching from Trish and Scott, and we've got amazing musical artists. Louisa Stowe, Kristen Hoffman, Omashar.
We got some psychics too.
Goddess Test, psychics and healers are going to be here on Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be really amazing. Don't be try to treat.
And I want to make a special thank you to Scott for being my mentor and muse, and being, in this cute little being, for keeping our legs warm. To Global Peace Tribe and Sign Network for running us out.
Thank you, John and Summer. We had dinner with them last night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I loved seeing them. Oh, gosh, it was so sweet. John and Summer Raymer, Scott Catamas, and as well as always, thank you to Roy, Russell, and Marvin for making all of this possible.
And that chick, Dawn.
Oh, and Dawn! A special thank you to Dawn.
And David, I really appreciated your comments. David Seawright. Thank you. Well, he's you if you were in the sea.
That's true. Thank you all for showing up, and we'll see you same place, same time next week. Have a really good day.